Here's something uncomfortable. The person you just broke up with and the one before them, they're not two different people. They're the same person, wearing two different faces. I know that sounds dramatic, but stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to be able to name your pattern, not vaguely, specifically. You're going to look back at your last 2 or 3 relationships and see the thread running through all of them. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Most people, when you ask them why they date who they date, say some version of the same thing. I just have a type. Maybe it's a look, maybe it's a personality. The funny ones, the intense ones, the ones who take forever to text back. And on the surface, that explanation feels true. Harmless even, like picking a favorite cuisine. But here's the myth in that explanation. It treats attraction like a preference, like something you're choosing fresh every time with a clear head. It's not. What feels like a preference is actually a search query. And you didn't write it. Someone else did. A much younger version of you, before you even had the language to know what was happening. There's a second myth worth clearing out of the way too, because it usually shows up right after the first one. You've probably heard opposites attract. It sounds like the counter-argument to everything I just said, proof that people don't repeat a pattern. They seek out difference. But look closer at most opposite pairings, and the opposites are almost always surface level. Different hobbies, different energy levels, different senses of humor. Underneath that surface difference, the emotional architecture, how conflict gets handled, how closeness gets offered or withheld, how safe it feels to need something from the other person, tends to be strikingly familiar. Opposites attract on the outside. Familiar attracts on the inside. That's the layer we're actually talking about. When you were small, long before you were forming memories you can consciously access, your brain was doing something critical. It was studying the people who took care of you, not their personalities, their patterns, how they responded when you needed something, how they handled closeness, how they handled distance, whether love came with conditions or with warmth or with unpredictability, whether you had to earn attention or whether it was just given. That study session became a template. Psychologists call this imprinting, and it's not metaphorical, it's structural. Your nervous system built a working model of what relationships are supposed to feel like, using the only data it had. And here's the part that matters most. It didn't build a model of what's healthy. It built a model of what's familiar. Those are not the same thing. And this is worth sitting with for a second, because it explains something that confuses a lot of people about themselves. Why someone who grew up with a lot of love can still end up in a pattern that looks nothing like that love, and why someone who grew up with very little consistency can end up, strangely, seeking out more of the same. The template isn't graded on quality. It's not asking, was this good for me? It's asking, is this the shape I recognize? A nervous system doesn't rank experiences by how healthy they were. It ranks them by how many times it's seen them before. This is the mechanism most people miss. Your brain doesn't search for compatible, it searches for familiar. And familiar gets coded as safe, even when what's familiar is actually inconsistency or emotional distance, or having to chase someone to feel wanted. Your body doesn't know the difference between this is good for me and this is what I know. It just knows what doesn't set off alarms. And painful but known will always feel calmer to your nervous system than unfamiliar but healthy. That unfamiliar version, that one sets off alarms. Not because it's dangerous, because it's new. So you walk into a room, meet someone, and within minutes, your body has already made a judgment call. Not about their character, about their frequency. Does this person's energy match a channel I've tuned into before? If yes, chemistry. That spark you feel, that's not fate. Half the time, it's recognition. There's a term for this pattern showing up over and over: repetition compulsion. And here's the stat anchor worth holding on to. The core relational blueprint we're talking about is largely in place by around age 7. 7! Before most people have a single conscious memory of choosing anything about how they love or get loved. You're running software installed before you could read. Let's make this concrete. Picture someone. We'll call her the composite of 100 conversations I could be describing. Relationship 1. A partner who's warm in public, cold and withdrawn in private, who she has to read like a mood ring every single day. It ends badly. She swears never again. Relationship 2, a year later. Different job, different city, different face entirely. But somehow, the same read-the-room anxiety, the same walking on eggshells, the same quiet, exhausting vigilance. Same person, different body. Worth noticing, this isn't only a romantic relationship pattern. It shows up in friendships that quietly drain you in the same specific way, one after another. It shows up at work, in how you pick managers to please or teams to prove yourself to. The nervous system doesn't reserve its search query for dating apps. It runs the same recognition process anywhere closeness or approval is on the line. If you've ever had the unsettling thought that your new boss reminds you of your old boss, who reminded you of someone else entirely, that's not a coincidence. That's the same mechanism, just wearing a different context. Knowing this doesn't automatically fix it. You can watch this entire video, nod along, recognize your own pattern with total clarity, and still feel the pull toward the same type next time. That's not a failure of insight. Insight lives in a different part of the brain than the part running the search query. You can know a stove is hot and still, out of habit, reach for the handle. So if awareness alone doesn't break it, what does? The interruption doesn't happen at the moment of falling. By the time you feel that spark, the decision's basically already made. Your nervous system got there first. The interruption has to happen earlier, at the moment of choice you don't usually notice you're making. The small moment where someone feels unfamiliar, maybe even a little boring compared to what you're used to, and you decide whether to lean in or walk away. That's the moment the pattern actually lives in. Not the big dramatic ending, the quiet, early, easy to miss beginning. Here's a contrast worth holding next to the earlier example. Someone who breaks this pattern doesn't usually describe it as a lightning bolt realization. They describe it as something almost anticlimactic. Meeting a person who doesn't spike their nervous system at all, who feels calm instead of magnetic, and catching themselves wanting to leave because it feels boring. And instead of leaving, staying long enough to find out that boring in this case was actually just peace, misfiled under a name that used to mean something else. That's the whole rewrite, happening in one small decision, repeated enough times that it becomes the new template. The pattern doesn't break because you understand it. It breaks because you catch yourself, in real time, at that boring, unfamiliar, safe-feeling moment, and you choose it anyway, even though it doesn't feel like chemistry yet. So here's what I'd leave you with. Think about your last 2 relationships. Different names, maybe different cities, different jobs, different faces entirely. Same fight? Same silence? Same feeling in your chest right before you'd bring something up? If the answer is yes, you're not bad at love. You're not choosing badly on purpose. You're just running a program that was installed a long time ago by someone who didn't know any better because you were 7. The good news is, a program that was installed can be rewritten, but only once you can see it clearly enough to catch it. Not after, when you're already in it. Before, at the boring, unfamiliar moment that doesn't feel like chemistry yet. Different bodies, same person. Until you decide otherwise.